Penina.
Hi, Natalie.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me tonight.
I am so excited. I've been waiting for this interview. I've been watching your videos. I've been stalking you. I've been waiting. I have like a whole list of questions I've been writing down. I need to ask Penina, and then we had to cancel last time because of my back. Thank you so much for rescheduling. And I'm so happy because I'm sure half an hour is not going to be enough, but we're just going to start with that. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. I'm glad you're back, and I'm glad that your back is doing better.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to. Believe me, I'm really glad. So I'm going to start with reading your bio for people who don't know
Okay.
you yet. And then we're going to dive right in the questions that I have prepared for you. So Penina is known for the story of her journey from a secular Jewish upbringing to evangelical, hope I'm saying that right, Christianity, and then finding her way to Torah observance. Penina once was asked by a student attending one of her lectures, how on earth do you change a belief? That started her on a journey to answer a question that she discovered is not only the key to spiritual fulfillment, but to all of life. Since then, Penina has been a Jewish educator, inspirational speaker, and life coach for over 20 years. And today she is the founder and editor-in-chief of UNORTHOBOXED, the lifestyle magazine for today's Jewish women. She's also the author of 2 books and hundreds of articles, as well as a frequent guest on podcasts, the proof is here, and radio shows. Before COVID, Penina regularly traveled to the US, Canada, South Africa, and the UK to speak. Originally from the US, Penina now lives in Israel with her husband, 4 married children, 11 grandchildren. And Penina's website is peninataylor.com. You'll see this in the podcast. You'll be able to go visit all the amazing stuff that Penina is doing. But now we have you for half an hour and we can ask all the questions we want, right?
In half an hour. Yeah.
In half an hour, right? I'm glad that we only have half an hour. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I read about you. I listened to your story. I actually saw a conference. It was an hour. Someone sent me a YouTube link. I was like, who has an hour to watch a lecture? And I did not stop for 1 second. I was like, the hour went by like 30. I don't know. It was so amazing. I was fascinated by your story. Of course, it resonated in a lot of ways, as you know how to make it resonate on a universal level. I think that you're an amazing speaker. And
Thank
the one
you.
question that came to me when I heard your story, because we did speak about how you went from different faiths, from Christianity, being Jewish secular, and then going back to being observant. I wanted to know, like, how did you know how it was time for you to change or to evolve to a different faith or belief? And not only how did you know, I'm going to ask you a big question and then you can, answer as you wish. But how did you also have the courage to do it?
Mm.
One thing to know, and also we're all interested, how was that a little voice inside of you? Was that an angel that came down? Like, how does it work? How do you
That's
know
an
about
angel.
that? And then once you know, how do you have the courage to actually get up and leave or, do what you have to do?
That is an absolutely huge question.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's very
Mhm.
multifaceted.
Right.
It's actually a hard question to answer, right? Because I believe that part of it has to do with the difference between the words knowing and believing. Because the way you worded the question was, how did I know it was
Right.
time?
Right.
Right? But many people use the words know and believe to mean like knowing is something that is for sure. It's a fact. It's, absolute. It's, as they say, written in stone. And if you believe something, that's something that you're unsure of, right? Like if you ask me what time it is, I say, I know it's 3:00. You're like, okay, she knows. And if I said, well, I believe it's 3:00, then you're like, oh, maybe I should ask somebody else because we're not sure, right? So know is used in a very strong way, and believe is weaker. But I actually believe that the words are the opposite, that know is weak and believe is strong. Why?
Wow.
Because
Okay.
there's a lot, well, there's a lot of things that we know, right? That don't change our behavior at all, right? For
For
example,
example,
how many people who smoke know that smoking is bad for them, but they
right,
do it anyway? And
right,
if you ask a smoker, 90%, I always make up numbers, but 90% of them, right, will say, yes, I know I shouldn't smoke. Not just I know it's bad for me, I know I shouldn't, but we
right,
do it anyway, right?
right,
How many of us look at that donut and we say, I know I shouldn't eat this. I know it's not good for me. And in my case, I have hypoglycemia, which means if I eat stuff with a lot of sugar, I end up getting shaky and crashing. And so I know it's not good for me. It's not just about weight, it's not good. And yet I will eat it anyway because knowledge doesn't affect behavior,
right,
but belief, right? How many people have died for their beliefs, even when their beliefs are not backed up by facts,
right,
right? How many terrorists die? How many, you have the kamikaze pilots in World War II, and kind of lahavdil to make a separation, but how many Jews have been murdered, have allowed themselves to be murdered rather than reject their faith. And I'm not saying that Judaism has no facts to back it up, but what I'm saying is that knowledge is something that rests in the head, and belief is something that rests in the heart, or even in a place that we might call the soul, because it's something that is very intangible. But when we move something from our head to our heart, then it becomes much stronger. Okay. It's like, then it becomes something that is that you'll do, that actually affect your behavior. And actually the truth is that everything that you do is influenced by what you believe. Now, when you have knowledge and belief that coincide, that come together, that's the formula for courage. That's the
um,
moment that you can take that leap and do something. And that's especially important when we're talking about business decisions, right? But you're still, if you're still unsure about whether or not to act, then you don't actually believe it. It's still in your head.
right,
So the point is, and the thing is that you have to have both the head and the heart, the knowledge and the belief involved if you're going to be successful. And that's regardless of whether we're talking about faith, making aliyah to Israel, starting a business. If you don't believe it, if your heart isn't in it, then don't do it, because the heart is actually the key. So
right,
many of us live in our head, but you have to involve the belief, the heart, or that other, we'll say the soul, right? So regarding my change of faith, I've always been a person who values truth. So like even when I didn't know what that really meant, I've just always been a very naturally curious person. I want to know not just the why, but what is. And
mm,
because of that curiosity, I'm always learning, I'm always researching, and unfortunately for a lot of people around me, I'm also always changing and growing. So I became a Christian in high school. And up until that point, there was, an emptiness in my life. And we could talk about all that went into my decision to do that. But I wasn't even 16 yet when I became a Christian. Um, but I sensed that there was this emptiness, right? So when a classmate presented me with a concept of God and what God expected from me, it was like handing a starving person a piece of bread. It was the best thing I had ever tasted because it gave meaning to my life. And during the 17 years that I was a practicing Christian, I was still always seeking the truth. And as it turns out, I say I, but my husband is also this kind of a person, which I'm very grateful for. So like, for example, when we discovered the origins of the Christmas tree were not biblical, that there's nowhere in the Christian Bible even that has anything to do with a Christmas tree. So we abandoned that custom. So even our Christian expression was always moving in the direction of truth. So 17 years later, when I was presented with some facts that indicated that there were real problems with the Christian claims, I had to figure out what was the truth. And the knowledge definitely came quicker than the belief. But once they were both there, that's when I made that leap.
Wow. I love that answer. You told me that this answer was like, encompassing everything, and that's true. That is true. I love
Yeah,
that formula between belief and knowledge equals courage. That is what gives people courage. And I would
right.
add that when you don't have the belief, that is what prevents you from acting and from having the courage, right? Which are the
Absolutely.
wrong beliefs or the false beliefs or everything that is preventing us and creating resistance. So it's totally, it
Right.
makes sense. Totally makes sense. So let me ask you something, because I'm going to go back to that student that we spoke about in your bio that says he says, like, how on earth do you change a belief? So I understand how you
Right.
change knowledge, right? You learn, you go, you ask, you're curious, you check, you read books, you ask people. I can understand how you change knowledge, but how do you change a belief? Because that's a question that we have regarding faith, but also regarding our life, regarding our business, right? So for you,
Right.
how did that happen that you were able, how did you change that belief?
So it's interesting. I have like a whole little cute little PDF thing about how to change a belief. It's a class that I've given, but the number one most important key to how you change a belief is you first have to be open to the possibility that the belief is wrong.
Ooh,
And that is
wow.
huge, right? Because if you are happy with the belief, if it's serving you well, whether you're talking about belief, religiously, or beliefs about yourself, if they're serving you well, if you're happy with them or comfortable with them, you're not open to the fact that they could be wrong, right? So then, like, I mean, even if we're talking about a belief like, I want to be a movie star, but I believe I'm a good actress, but I don't believe I'm beautiful enough to be successful, right? So now we have two conflicting beliefs. On the one hand, I believe I'm a good actress, but on the other hand, I don't believe that anybody would want to hire me as an actress. It was just something that came up that I picked on. Maybe it's not the best metaphor, but um, so that belief that I'm not good enough, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not whatever enough, right? Because all mindset coaches talk about not the belief that I'm not enough,
Right,
fill in the blank, right? So if you're not open to the possibility that that belief is wrong, you cannot change that belief.
right,
And you'll have a conflict, a constant conflict between what you know and what you believe, or even between what you believe and what you believe, depending on what those beliefs are. And you can't change the belief until you're open to the idea that it might not be the truth. And then
wow,
you have to identify the belief, and then you also have to recognize that just because you believe something doesn't make it true. And this is
right,
especially important with when dealing with relationships, to understand that another person's beliefs about you doesn't make them true,
right.
right? That's just a whole nother realm of mindset discussion. But and then one of the steps is to change your perspective. So there's obviously it's a whole thing, but the most important key is that first one, that you have to be open.
Right. I love that. I love that because you spoke about, are you happy or are you comfortable? Right. I mean, you can be comfortable and not necessarily happy. You can be comfortable because it's
Correct.
familiar, because that's what because that's what you've been used to, and so you're comfortable and you might not want to change it. And I definitely agree that the first thing is, so if I go back to the faith, and I love how you're talking also about the faith and life and business at the same time, because at the end of the day, we're human beings, and that's how we work. It doesn't matter, what is the application of how we work. But what I'm
Right.
hearing here is a lot of personal development, a lot of inner conversation between you and yourself, maybe between you and your husband. And for me, I mean, having also gone from one world to the next, from one extreme to another, maybe not Christianity, but I was ultra Orthodox, and I became, secular. And I know that beyond the internal conversations that are happening between us and ourselves, whether we believe, what do we know, what, looking for the truth, being curious, there is, and the courage of accepting, okay, I'm open to another possibility. And that is in a very internal sphere, right? I hear that. But
Yes.
I'm wondering, like, when you make those decisions, there are so much impact on other people, like whether it's
Oh,
your
yeah.
first circle of family or friends, or people that people at work. Like, it's one thing to have the courage to do it between you and yourself, and to make that leap of faith. But it's another thing to really be in the open with that decision, and having so much consequences coming from this decision of changing your life, changing everything, changing. It's not just
Right.
about changing what you believe, it's really changing everything in your life. So I'm not gonna, I know it's not like an hour conversation, but how was that for you? I mean, how was that? What people followed you? People understood you right away, or did you have to go through a period of time where people did not understand, and like you felt alone? Like, how was that process?
It's interesting because it all depends on the decision that you're talking about, whether or not the change has to affect others. But going from Christianity to Judaism, it definitely did. That was huge. And for us, it was an extremely, extremely difficult process. My husband was not on board with me. And so we spent 4.5 years fighting, basically. And we almost divorced over it. There was, suicidal thoughts involved. It was very, very hard because when you're talking about being open to the idea that your belief may be wrong, um, you know, I'm going to just kind of like shift a little bit here, but your brain has one job, right? And that's to keep you alive. That is to protect your physical and emotional well-being. A lot of people think about the physical, but they don't think about the fact that the brain interprets the emotional well-being as well as threatening to you, right? So your brain is going to do everything they can to keep you alive, to keep you safe, to keep you from harm. And in the case of going from Christianity to Judaism, and especially with the whole community and the entire belief system that was involved, that was really very frightening, because there was a question as to what happens to me if I abandon this belief system, which says that I will burn in hell forever, which is another form of no longer being safe. My brain is supposed to keep me safe. And it was a long 4.5 years, but thank God my husband and I are still together. We've been married, I forgot the number now, 34 years.
Wow.
34 years to the same person. Yep. We've grown together, we've changed together, we've changed apart, but always growing. Again, if both partners are open and willing to and want to be the best person they can be, then you can overcome almost anything, really. So, but I'm trying to remember, I kind of like lost my way a little bit. Your question was
my question, you answered the question basically, and I'm thinking, when you're speaking that when we're facing change of beliefs or limiting beliefs in our life or in our business, I mean, they appear to be huge, they appear to be big, but
right.
I'm not going to say we because I can't speak for everyone, but when I hear your story, I'm like, well, if this belief was able to change, and if you had the courage to change such a really huge belief, so it puts every other belief in perspective. This is the inspiration I get from you, right? It's like,
Well, I'm glad.
this is what I'm getting from you, that I'm sure it must have been so difficult, and when we are facing with other changes or beliefs, we also feel it's difficult, but knowing and hearing and listening from someone that has gone through such a huge change and come out of the process successfully, this is such a big lesson. This is such a big inspiration, because you're like, well, my change is nothing compared to that, or my belief is nothing compared to that. You know what I mean? Like, this is what comes to mind when I'm hearing you speak.
I really appreciate that. The thing is, though, we have to remember not to ever compare,
Right.
because what looks really huge, for me, something that you've experienced that looks smaller, right? Like somebody could say, well, she was sexually abused and I never had that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the challenges that you faced weren't equally traumatic for you.
For sure.
They, on an external scale, perhaps not, but you're a human being. And so we can't compare each other because your experience is so different than mine. So
sure.
On the one hand, we definitely
right. I'm just gonna reply to this, because you're so right. It's not to compare, but it's the process that stays the same.
Yeah.
And so,
exactly.
The process is inspiring, because the process, of course, I'm not going to compare this was huge, mine is small, but I can say if this process worked for something, and worked, because when I say worked, it's not, there's no judgment here. I think every process works, but seeing you today, aligned with yourself and successful and happy with where you are, that's what I mean by work, not because you went from
I understand.
one to the other, right? It's there's nothing that works, objectively. There's just like, how do you feel, if you're happy and if you're aligned with yourself and with your and with everything you do. So, and we know that stopping the limiting beliefs is bringing us to bigger alignment and more harmony and more being of ourselves. And so I'm saying, if this process that you spoke about before worked for you, it's definitely a process that can work, in other cases. And that's what I meant by the inspiration that it brings.
No, I get it. I didn't mean to jump down your throat. It's just such an important thing for everybody to remember, that their pain, that their struggle is equally valid and equally traumatic, or can be, because we do that. We make a mistake of kind of comparing ourselves. That's all I was saying, but so being open, really, that it's just so huge. Like, I don't even know that we can cover how huge this is in the remaining time we have. Being open to the idea that your belief might be wrong, might not be true, and being then everything, all possibilities are before you when you do that.
Exactly. And I think that it brings us really also to the last part, of what we wanted to talk about, which is, how it's possible to always change, how it's possible to, like you're saying, like it's never too late, right? It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to start a new business, to have a new idea. And I think that it's also based on what you're saying. If you keep that curiosity and you keep that open perspective of everything, everything can change, then it's never too late. So tell us a little bit about your professional career in all this, because you had also a successful career in all this. So tell us about that. Tell us how this happened.
So it's interesting, before I came back to Judaism, I was a speaker in the Christian world. And when I came back to Judaism, suddenly I went from being somebody who was considered an expert and a teacher and a knowledgeable person and, a speaker and somebody to look up to somebody who knows nothing. And that is an extremely difficult place to be, to find yourself going from somebody who is, not just respected, but from somebody who knows a lot, to a leader,
leadership
to
position.
somebody who knows absolutely nothing. And because of my ravenous curiosity, I actually learned a lot about Judaism very, very quickly. But remember, it took 4.5 years for my husband to come along. So the Jewish community kept me at arm's length because they didn't want an intermarried woman being seen as a role model or a speaker, right? So during those 4.5 years, I really had to try to figure out who I was outside of as far as career goes, outside of religion, because religion and my career were very tightly interwoven. So at the time, I joined a speaking club called Toastmasters, and
Nice.
I'll try to keep the story very short, but I was actually being groomed to become a motivational speaker. The club that I was a part of had several internationally renowned speakers in the club who were giving back to the people there, and they saw some potential for me. And so I began working on that. And then when my husband chose to convert to Judaism, then it kind of picked up, and I began speaking in Jewish venues about my journey. And I had been doing that for 20 years until COVID. Well, not 2016 because of the 4 that it took, but I was traveling to several English speaking countries, sharing my story, but also during that time I was going through a transition of wanting to help people with mindset, and rather than tearing down Christianity, I wanted to build up people. And that's what I wanted to spend my life doing, was building people up. So, shuls and communities would bring me out to tell my story, but oftentimes they'd bring me out for a whole like Shabbaton or a retreat. And so instead of spending the other 2 or 3 talks talking about why Christianity is wrong, I shifted to spending those other 2 or 3 talks talking about how to experience a miracle, goal setting, mind setting, beliefs, this sort of thing. And that was starting to go really well. My reputation was starting to be built. I was a little bit of an influencer, whatever. And then COVID hit. And so, at 52 years old, I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I started by trying to do some online coaching. I created a course called Coaching with Courage for coaches. And the first launch, I had 10 people enrolled, which I felt was a success. And the second launch, I had nobody enroll. And the third one, I had nobody enroll, because at that point, all of the Jewish institutions had lots of free stuff available online, and everybody was doing coaching, and everybody was offering courses, and everybody had Zoom fatigue. And I was like, okay, this is not happening. I need a course correction. So I sat back and I just relaxed. And this is really important, that it's sometimes in the place of just being instead of trying that the magic and the inspiration happens. And it was while I was davka not trying to figure out what I was going to do with my career that I was inspired to start this magazine, Unorthoboxed. And we have been getting such amazing feedback. Everybody from almost Haredi to Reform and non-observant and just kind of ethnically connected. Everybody says that the magazine is in a niche that was needed. We have currently we're averaging about 40,000 page hits per month.
Wow.
With I think 10,000 unique visitors. Yeah.
Nice.
And so it's really amazing. But I think it's if you think that things aren't going right, first of all, we don't have time to talk about it, but one of my big things is making a distinction between goals and metrics and strategy and vision, because people set goals that aren't goals because they can't, and then they feel deflated and defeated, and that's a whole nother talk. But
Oh, we have to invite you again for sure.
my pleasure.
For sure, for sure. I love what you said about, inspiration comes when you stop doing and you're, in your being energy. And, I speak a lot
Yes.
about the born to do and about alignment and about your purpose. And one of the exercises in the born to do discovery is meditate, to look inside, and to stop the running and panicking because we don't know what to do. And I think your story is a great inspiration. I'm sure I know a lot of people had to reinvent themselves during COVID, and you're just
right.
presenting here an amazing story of reinvention and knowing how to bounce back. And it's just amazing. I think it really works well together. I mean, you said your religious life and your professional life, but it's really the same person, right? It's the same person that is
Right.
curious, that is ready to open to new perspective, that is ready to challenge their beliefs. And so we're really the same person. So both journeys are really very, very much aligned. And to finish, I think that you have a special promotion for people that want to advertise in ultra. Say that again. How do we say
Unorthodoxed. Unorthodoxed.
Oh my God, unorthodox. I have to say that. So, can you tell us about that special promotion?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, right now we're just still in the beginning stages of getting our advertisers on board. And so we're going to offer a really huge discount, like 50% off of our advertised media rates for anybody who hears this podcast and would like to advertise on our website. Just write to us at advertising@unorthoboxed.com. And let us know, just mention the JWE podcast, and we'll give you that 50% discount. And we're happy to have you. Yeah.
Amazing. And we'll add this in the comments in the Facebook group. But if you hear that in the podcast, make sure to go visit this amazing magazine. And I think that, after this interview, we can see how it's not only a magazine, it's also inspiration and leadership and just, another way of being that you're presenting from yourself and from your story. So it's really amazing. Thank you so much for being with us, Penina. Like I said,
pleasure.
Half an hour is not enough, but we'll invite you. And I'm sure that if people have comments or questions, they'll be able to reach you and to get answers. But I was really inspired by your journey. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.